Rachel Sider, who's a Syria policy advisor from the humanitarian organisation, the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thanks for coming in and talking to us today. I mean, we saw in that report, didn't we, the incredible conditions that people are actually working in, trying to deliver aid, where at the same time you've got warplanes flying overhead and explosions very nearby to where they were.
Absolutely. It's a very difficult operating environment across Syria, and what we've seen is that humanitarian access is one of the most difficult and complex things to achieve throughout the conflict, particularly in eastern Ghouta, which has been besieged for over 4 years now. And it's been very difficult for aid agencies to operate within the enclave itself, as well as to access it from places such as Damascus.
I mean, what kind of assurances can be given to aid agencies working in that situation? Because you would expect, wouldn't you, to there to be some kind of ceasefire in that kind of operation. I mean, is that normal that they're going in that situation with warplanes flying overhead?
Typically not. So what we look to is some of the UN Security Council resolutions, which demand that a ceasefire occurs in order to be able to deliver unimpeded and sustained humanitarian access. And what we've had to resort to are these one-off convoys that are quite difficult to accomplish and to arrange with the Syrian government, but also to be able to pull off in a very short period of time. And what we saw yesterday was a challenging operating environment with ongoing hostilities and a prolonged delivery of assistance that ultimately had to be cut short because it took much longer than the 9 hours they expected.
Is it worth that risk? I mean, bearing in mind that presumably these convoys could actually be hit either by stray missiles or just because people are simply not aware that they're actually there in the first place. Is it worth that communication and therefore worth the risk?
Well, there is a lot of coordination that goes into arranging these convoys before they enter a place such as eastern Ghouta. So the arrangements are typically made, and it's very clear to all of the parties to the conflict that there is a convoy entering at a designated period of time. So there's really no excuse for these convoys to be attacked. What we've seen continuously across the Syria conflict is attack on aid workers, attack on local humanitarian partners, attack of medical facilities and schools, some of these primary places where we rely on delivering our assistance and should be protected by international law.
And is work carrying on now to try and do more deliveries, you know, even after what happened yesterday?
So the UN has put in for a number of convoys entering eastern Ghouta, and we've only seen 2 enter this year. There's an expectation that that will continue, but also what we need to see is sustained and ongoing access to all besieged areas, including eastern Ghouta and other hard-to-reach locations across Syria, which have been designated by the UN as difficult to access. And that requires far more than a series of convoys. It requires constant access by a range of humanitarian partners to deliver life-saving services and assistance to populations that have been lacking assistance for years, if not months.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this conflict's been going on for over 7 years now. We've had various hotspots, haven't we? I mean, the hotspot at the moment seems to be eastern Ghouta, but very much that situation's still alive elsewhere in Syria too.
Correct. I think while all eyes are on eastern Ghouta, we need to remember that the ceasefire that was mandated by the new UN Security Council resolution applies across Syria, and we're seeing breaches of that ceasefire in the north, in the south, as well as in the center of the country.
Okay, Rachel Sider, thanks very much for coming in and talking to